The text message from Sarah popped up while I was stirring my coffee, a mundane Tuesday morning ritual shattered by 6 words. Did you hear about Trinity and Xavier? My spoon clattered against the ceramic mug. I was 29, an interior designer who used to teach art, and I dated Xavier Meyer for 3 years. Trinity Santos, my cousin, was 26. I typed back, "Hear what?" even though a cold dread was already tightening its grip around my chest. Sarah's reply came almost instantly. "They're engaged. She just posted it on Instagram. Huge diamond." My first thought wasn't anger. Not yet. It was a strange, disorienting quiet, like the world had suddenly muted, engaged. My ex-boyfriend, the man who'd sworn he loved me, was engaged to my younger cousin, the same cousin I'd practically raised, who used to braid my hair and steal my clothes. I put my phone down, picked up the mug, and took a slow sip of coffee, letting the bitterness coat my tongue. It was exactly how I felt. My mother, Esther, called an hour later. She was 56, and her voice always had this particular lilt when she was trying to smooth over something she knew would upset me. "Daisy, honey, have you heard the news? About Trinity and Xavier?" I kept my voice flat, almost bored. It was a practiced skill, this emotional neutrality, honed over years of dealing with my family. "Yes. Isn't it wonderful?" Her enthusiasm felt like a slap. "I know it's a bit sudden given your history, but they seem so happy. And Trinity is just glowing." I didn't respond. I could hear the unspoken expectation in her voice, the plea for me to be the bigger person, to not make a fuss. This was Esther's default setting, appearances above all else. My feelings were always secondary to the family narrative, especially if that narrative involved someone else's happiness. "Look, I know it's probably a little awkward for you," she continued, her voice dropping slightly. "But you really should try to be happy for them. It's a big day for the family." "I'm sure it is," I said, still flat. My mind was already elsewhere, cataloging the subtle ways my family had always favored Trinity, always dismissed my quiet achievements while celebrating her louder ones. Then came the final cut, delivered with a sigh that was meant to sound sympathetic but landed like an accusation. "You know, Trinity was a little worried about how you'd take it. She even asked if it might be better if you didn't come to the wedding, just to avoid any awkwardness. You understand, right? Don't take it personally. Don't take it personally." My mother, 56 years old, was telling her 29-year-old daughter that it was better if she wasn't present for her cousin's wedding to her ex-boyfriend. The man I'd spent 3 years building a life with, the man who'd once promised me forever. The man Trinity had seduced during a brief breakup that, in hindsight, felt less like a break and more like a carefully orchestrated handoff. "Of course, Mom," I said, the words tasting like ash. "I understand perfectly." I hung up, the silence of my apartment suddenly deafening. My hands were steady, my breathing even. No tears, no raised voice, just a cold, hard knot forming in my gut. They thought I was the bitter ex, the one who couldn't move on. They thought I was a threat to their perfect, shiny new narrative. They were right about one thing. I wouldn't ruin their day. Not in the way they expected, anyway. I spent the rest of the day working, designing a minimalist living room for a new client. Every clean line, every precise measurement felt like a balm. Control. That's what I needed. Later that night, long after I'd finished dinner and was winding down, my phone buzzed. It was almost midnight. A notification from my email. I didn't recognize the sender immediately, but the subject line made my blood run cold and hot all at once. It was from Xavier. I opened it, my thumb hovering over the screen. The message was short, just a few lines. "I miss you. I never stopped." The email from Xavier. "I miss you. I never stopped," sat in my inbox like a venomous little secret. It was 11:58 p.m. Trinity and he had announced their engagement earlier that day. He was 30, I was 29. He was engaged, and still, he was sending me this. My first instinct was to delete it, to block him, to pretend it never happened. But then, a different thought, colder and sharper, took hold. I opened the email again, took a screenshot, and saved it in a new folder on my laptop titled Receipts. This wasn't about anger anymore, it was about something quieter, more calculated. They wanted to cast me as the bitter ex? Fine. But I wouldn't be a caricature. I would be the truth. Over the next few days, the messages continued. Not a deluge, but a steady drip. A text. Thinking of you, D. Remember that little Italian place? An old photo from his camera roll, a blurry selfie of us laughing, time-stamped from 2 years ago. An email with a link to a song we used to listen to. Subject line. This still makes me think of you. I didn't reply to any of them. I just collected every text, every email, every voice memo. I screenshot them, dated them, and filed them away. It was tedious, but it was also strangely therapeutic. Each notification was a fresh piece of evidence, a quiet affirmation that I wasn't crazy, that he wasn't just some innocent victim swept away by my manipulative cousin. He was complicit. He was actively reaching out to me, the woman he'd supposedly moved on from, the woman he was marrying someone else to forget. It wasn't just about him, though. It was about Trinity. I remembered a conversation from years ago, when I was 22 and Trinity was 19. We were sitting on my bed flipping through magazines. I was dating Xavier then, and he'd just sent me flowers at my art class. Trinity had watched me read the card, a strange look in her eyes. "You're so lucky, Daisy," she'd said, her voice soft, almost wistful. "He's so sweet to you. You always get the good ones." She'd paused, then added, "I always wanted what you had." At the time, I'd dismissed it as a younger cousin's innocent admiration. Now, looking back, it felt like a declaration of intent. A quiet, unsettling promise. Trinity, 26 now, had always been good at getting what she wanted, especially if it belonged to someone else. She had a way of making you feel like you were the one being selfish for not sharing. About a week after the engagement news, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Daisy? It's Tessa. Tessa Santos, Trinity's older sister." She was 28, and the black sheep of their family, much like I was in mine. We hadn't spoken in over a year, not since a particularly nasty family argument where Trinity had managed to twist Tessa's words into something ugly, and I'd been too exhausted to defend her. "Tessa," I said, surprised. "Hey! Look," she said, her voice a low rumble. "I heard about Trinity and Xavier. I know it's probably not my place, but I just wanted to say, if you ever want to talk, I'm done pretending with her, too." My breath hitched. Tessa had always been the only one who saw through Trinity's act, the only one who understood the subtle currents of manipulation that ran through our family. Her call felt like a lifeline, an unexpected crack in the wall of my emotional isolation. "I might take you up on that," I said, a flicker of something new, something almost like hope, stirring within me. The next day, another message from Xavier. This one was a voice note. His voice, warm and familiar, filled my apartment. "Hey, Dee. I keep dreaming about you wearing that robe. You know, the silk one? The one I got you for Christmas 2 years ago. You looked incredible in it." The silk robe. The one he'd picked out himself, soft and dove gray. The one I still kept folded at the back of my closet. The one I hadn't worn since he walked out. It was a calculated move, a direct appeal to a shared intimacy. A ghost of a past he was actively trying to resurrect, even as he planned a future with my cousin. He wanted to pull me back in, to keep me on the hook. He didn't know I was already reeling him in, one quiet, damning piece of evidence at a time. The voice note from Xavier, his words about the silk robe echoing in my apartment, felt like a test. He was trying to gauge my reaction, to see if I was still on his hook. I didn't reply. Not with a text, not with an emoji, not with a single character. Just silence. This was my new strategy. Strategic ghosting. To the outside world, I was unbothered. I posted innocuous updates on my social media. A new interior design project, a picture of my perfectly brewed coffee, a quiet evening with a book. Nothing that screamed scorned ex. Nothing that would give Esther, my mother, any ammunition to tell me I was embarrassing myself. I wanted them to believe I was truly over it, that I was happy for Trinity and Xavier. Let them think I was the bigger person, the one who had gracefully moved on. Meanwhile, Xavier kept trying. A text asking if I was free for coffee. A late-night call I let ring until it went to voicemail. Another email, this one just a single question mark. Each attempt, each unanswered plea, was another screenshot for my receipts folder. It was a quiet, almost meditative process. The more he tried, the more evidence I had of his duplicity, even while engaged. A few days after Tessa's call, we met. Not at a trendy cafe or a busy restaurant, but at a small, unassuming park on the other side of town. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and the park was mostly empty, just a few nannies pushing strollers. Tessa, at 28, looked tired but determined. She wore jeans and a faded band t-shirt, a stark contrast to Trinity's usual polished look. "Thanks for meeting," she said, her voice low as we sat on a bench under a sprawling oak tree. "Thanks for calling," I replied. "I appreciate it." She nodded, picking at a loose thread on her jeans. "Look, Daisy, I know how she operates. I've lived with it my whole life, the way she makes you feel like you're the problem, even when she's the one pulling the strings. She's good at it," I agreed, the bitterness of familiar taste. "Good? She's a master manipulator," Tessa scoffed. "And with Xavier? It wasn't an accident. She targeted him. I heard her bragging about it." My stomach clenched. Bragging? Yeah, to a mutual friend, after a few too many drinks. She said she'd make him forget your name, like she did with my fiancé. Your fiancé? I remembered vaguely that Tessa had been engaged a few years back, but the wedding had been called off suddenly. I'd never known why. Tessa's jaw tightened. "Yeah, Mark. She got into his head, told him I was too controlling, too demanding, convinced him I wasn't the right one. Then she comforted him right into her bed. My wedding was called off a month before the date." "She acts like it was just a coincidence, that they found love after I messed up. But she engineered it. She always wanted what I had, just like she always wanted what you had." The pieces clicked into place. Trinity's wistful comment, "I always wanted what you had." Her carefully cultivated innocence. It wasn't just about Xavier. It was a pattern, a deep-seated competitive need to possess what belonged to someone else. It made my blood run cold, but also solidified my resolve. "So, what are you going to do?" I asked, looking at her. Tessa met my gaze, a flicker of something dark and knowing in her eyes. "I don't know yet, but I'm tired of her getting away with it, and I figured you might be too." "I am," I confirmed. "I've been collecting things." I didn't elaborate, but the look on her face told me she understood. We talked for another hour, comparing notes, sharing stories of Trinity's past manipulations. It was cathartic, like finally exhaling after holding my breath for years. By the time we parted ways, a quiet understanding had formed between us. We didn't explicitly state our intentions, but the unspoken agreement hung in the air. Something was going to happen. I got home late that afternoon, still processing everything Tessa had told me. The doorbell rang just as I was kicking off my shoes. I peered through the peephole. Rory Mackenzie, my childhood best friend. 30 years old, grounded, observant. He stood on my doorstep, a concerned frown on his face, holding a bag from my favorite coffee shop. I opened the door. "Rory, what are you doing here?" He offered a small, knowing smile. "I heard about Trinity and Xavier. And I know you, Daisy. You're quiet when you're hurting. You don't have to do anything alone." Rory's appearance on my doorstep, a silent offering of coffee and solidarity, was a stark contrast to the emotional battlefield my family had become. He was 30, my age, and had known me since we were kids, through scraped knees and first heartbreaks. He knew my quietness wasn't indifference, but a sign of something deeper brewing. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. He walked into my apartment, setting the coffee on the counter. His presence was a comfort, a steady anchor in the swirling chaos of my thoughts. "You look like you've been doing some heavy thinking," he observed, leaning against the kitchen island. "Something like that," I admitted. I briefly told him about Tessa's call, about her confirmation of Trinity's manipulative pattern. I didn't go into detail about the receipts folder, not yet. Rory was loyal, but I wasn't ready to lay out my full plan. Not until it was fully formed. He listened, his expression thoughtful. "So, Trinity's still Trinity then. Some things never change." He'd known her too, of course, from family gatherings. He knew her charm, and he knew her edge. "No," I agreed. "Some things just get sharper." His eyes met mine, a quiet understanding passing between us. He didn't ask what I was going to do. He just said, "You don't have to do anything alone." It wasn't a question, but a statement of unwavering support. That was Rory. Always there, always steady. The next few weeks were a blur of work and quiet planning. I continued to collect Xavier's messages, which, to my grim satisfaction, continued to trickle in. He was persistent, oblivious to the fact that every "I miss you and thinking of you" was just another nail in his own coffin. My interior design business was thriving, which provided a welcome distraction and a steady income. It was through a client, actually, that I stumbled upon the perfect piece of the puzzle. They were looking for venues for a corporate event, and one of the options was a restored colonial estate called the Grandeur Gardens. I pulled up the website. It was exactly what Trinity would choose. Sprawling, manicured gardens, elegant architecture, a picture-perfect setting for a lavish wedding. As I scrolled through the photos, my breath hitched. There it was. A stunning penthouse suite, directly above the main garden area where ceremonies were held. It had a wide, wraparound balcony that overlooked the entire grounds, offering a panoramic view of the altar. A cold, exhilarating clarity washed over me. This was it, the perfect vantage point. I clicked on the booking information. The penthouse suite was available for private rentals for events. It cost $2,500 for a full day. A significant sum, but for what I had in mind, it felt like a small price to pay. I booked it online, using a burner email and a fake last name, Daisy Miller, just in case. The confirmation email arrived instantly. The date was set for a Saturday in early June, about 2 months away. Now I needed the exact timeline. This was where Tessa came in. She was still in contact with some of the family members who were involved in the wedding planning, mostly out of a sense of obligation. I called her. "Hey, Daisy," she answered. "What's up?" "I need a favor," I said, keeping my voice casual. "I heard they picked the Grandeur Gardens. Do you happen to know the ceremony time? Just curious, for family planning purposes." Tessa chuckled dryly. "Oh, I know. Trinity's been micromanaging every second. The ceremony starts promptly at 4:00 p.m. Vows are expected around 4:20, maybe 4:25, depending on how long Jermaine goes on. He's the officiant, a family friend." "Why do you ask?" "Just checking," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. Thanks, Tessa. I hung up, the pieces of the puzzle slotting into place. 4:20 p.m. Perfect. A few days later, I drove out to the Grandeur Gardens. I couldn't access the penthouse, of course, but I walked the grounds, observing the layout. The main aisle led directly to the altar, which was positioned under a large, ornate gazebo. Directly above it, I could see the wide balcony of the penthouse suite. From there, anyone standing on that balcony would have a clear, unobstructed view of the entire ceremony, and everyone at the ceremony would have a clear, unobstructed view of the balcony. I mentally rehearsed my appearance. I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't make a scene in the traditional sense. I just needed to be seen. The silence, the unexpected presence, would speak volumes. The week before the wedding, Esther called. Her voice was laced with a familiar, pitying tone. Daisy, honey, I know this is hard for you, but please, for my sake, for the family's sake, at least promise me, don't embarrass yourself. The words hung in the air, a thinly veiled warning, a plea to uphold the family's carefully constructed facade. Don't worry, Mom, I said, my voice sweet and calm. I wouldn't dream of it. Don't worry, Mom, I had told Esther, my voice sweet and calm. I wouldn't dream of it. The lie tasted like victory. She wanted me to disappear, to be a good little ghost. I would be a ghost, all right. A haunting one. With the penthouse booked and the ceremony timeline confirmed, the final piece of my plan began to take shape. The wedding gift. This wasn't going to be some whispered rumor or a dramatic confrontation. This was going to be undeniable, irrefutable proof. I called Rory. Hey, can you come over? I need your design expertise. He arrived an hour later, a knowing look in his eyes. He knew I wasn't asking for help with a client project. I led him to my home office, where my laptop was open to the receipts folder. I need to put all of this into a physical form, I explained, gesturing to the hundreds of screenshots, texts from Xavier, emails, even a few blurry photos he'd sent, all dating from the day Trinity, and he announced their engagement up until just a few days ago. The voice notes were trickier, but I had a plan for those too. Rory scrolled through the folder, his eyebrows rising higher with each screenshot. He really kept at it, didn't he? He murmured, a note of disgust in his voice. Like a persistent rash, I agreed. And I need to present it in a way that's impossible to ignore, something elegant but damning. We brainstormed. A binder was too crude. A digital display was too easily dismissed. Then Rory, with his keen eye for aesthetics and his practical mind, hit on it. A book, he suggested, hand-bound. Like a private journal, something that looks significant. The idea was perfect. We spent the next few days meticulously compiling everything. I printed each screenshot on high-quality paper, ensuring the time and date stamps were clearly visible. Rory, with his graphic design background, helped me lay out the pages, making sure the flow was logical, a chronological narrative of Xavier's deceit. Each page was a silent accusation. For the voice notes, I had a small, high-quality digital voice recorder. I played Xavier's most damning messages. The one about the silk robe, the one where he said he missed me, the one where he hinted at regrets about his engagement. I recorded these, then transferred them to a small flat USB drive. Rory suggested we embed the USB drive subtly into the back cover of the book, making it a hidden yet accessible edition. The cover itself was simple, unadorned. No title, no names. Just a plain, dark gray cover, mirroring the color of the silk robe Xavier had mentioned. The pages were thick, creamy, and felt substantial in the hand. It was a beautiful object, meticulously crafted, designed to be picked up, opened, and read. Inside, on the very first page, I placed a selfie. Not of me alone, but of me and Xavier. It was from 3 weeks ago, a quick, impulsive shot he'd taken when he'd accidentally run into me at the grocery store. He'd insisted on a quick coffee just to catch up. I'd agreed, curious to see how far he'd push it. He'd leaned in close for the photo, a familiar, possessive arm around my waist. I hadn't smiled. I looked tired, almost resigned. But it was proof. Proof of proximity. Proof of his continued pursuit, just weeks before his wedding. I made sure the timestamp was prominent. The very last page, after all the evidence, contained my only handwritten contribution. In neat, precise script I wrote, "I didn't ruin your day, he did." It was an undeniable truth, a quiet declaration. I wouldn't need to say a word. The book would speak for itself. The day before the wedding, the book sat on my coffee table, a finished artifact of betrayal. I felt a strange mix of calm and anticipation. The plan was solid. The evidence was irrefutable. My phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I knew who it was. Xavier. He'd been calling more frequently the past few days, a desperate edge to his messages. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Then a voicemail notification popped up. I pressed play. His voice was strained, raw. "Daisy, please, just tell me not to marry her. Tell me you want me back. Please, just say it." His voice broke on the last word. He was begging me to save him from a choice he had willingly made. I listened to the voicemail again, then deleted it. I didn't need to save this one. It was just confirmation. Confirmation that he was a coward, and that he was entirely aware of the depth of his own deceit. I didn't tell him not to marry her. I didn't say anything at all. I just let the silence, my silence, be the answer. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, almost mockingly perfect. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves outside my apartment window. I felt no nerves, only a quiet, resolute calm. The book, my meticulously crafted wedding gift, lay on my coffee table, ready. I arrived at the Grandeur Gardens at 2 p.m., 2 hours before the ceremony was set to begin. The valet, a young man who looked barely out of high school, didn't bat an eye at my fake last name. "Penthouse Suite, Ms. Miller," he said, handing me a key card. The suite was exactly as pictured online. Spacious, elegantly furnished, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sprawling gardens. And of course, the balcony. It stretched along the entire length of the suite, a perfect, unobstructed view of the gazebo where the ceremony would take place. I walked out onto it, feeling the sunlight on my face. From this height, the garden looked like a miniature stage waiting for its players. I set my bag down and took a long, slow breath. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about precision, about showing them the truth they had so desperately tried to bury. I bathed, letting the warm water soothe my skin. Then I pulled out the silk robe, the dove gray one Xavier had given me 2 Christmases ago, the one he'd mentioned in his voice note. It felt soft against my skin, a quiet defiance. I wasn't wearing it for him, or for Trinity. I was wearing it for myself, as a reminder of what had been and what was about to be exposed. I dressed simply, a dark, elegant slip dress under the robe, easy to shed later. My hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail. No elaborate makeup. I wanted to look composed, unbothered, a ghost in plain sight. As 4 p.m. approached, I heard the faint strains of string music drifting up from the gardens. Guests were beginning to arrive, their murmurs and laughter carrying on the breeze. I watched from the safety of the suite, unseen. I saw Esther, my mother, in a tasteful blue dress, her hair perfectly coiffed. She was already mingling, her smile fixed, a picture of maternal pride. I saw Audrey, one of our cousins, looking sweet and a little overwhelmed, probably already tired of the small talk. At 4:15 p.m., the music swelled. The processional had begun. I saw Trinity, a vision in white, walking down the aisle on her father's arm. She looked radiant, every inch the blushing bride. Xavier stood at the altar, his back to me, facing her. He looked nervous, but excited, oblivious. I picked up the hand-bound book. It felt heavy in my hands, a repository of secrets. I opened it to the first page. The selfie of me and Xavier, time-stamped 3 weeks prior. The image was clear, undeniable. The officiant, Jermaine Paul, a man I vaguely remembered from family gatherings, began to speak. His voice, amplified by the sound system, wafted clearly up to my balcony. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Trinity Santos and Xavier Meyer in holy matrimony." I walked slowly, deliberately, to the edge of the balcony. The silk robe billowed slightly in the gentle breeze. I leaned against the railing, the book held open, prominently displayed, the selfie facing outwards. I didn't make a sound. I didn't need to. Germain continued, his voice calm and resonant. "Marriage is a sacred bond, a commitment of love, trust, and fidelity." He paused. Then came the words I had been waiting for. The traditional, ceremonial invitation for disruption. "If any person knows of a reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." At that exact moment, I leaned a little further forward, ensuring I was fully visible. The sunlight caught the open page of the book, illuminating the selfie. My face, unsmiling, looked down upon the scene. A ripple went through the crowd. First, a few heads turned, then more. Whispers started, then grew louder. Someone gasped. A woman in the front row, a distant aunt, pointed a trembling finger upwards. Then, a man's voice, loud and incredulous, shouted my name. "Daisy!" Below, Esther, my mother, who had been smiling just moments before, looked up. Her eyes widened, her face draining of all color. Her hand flew to her chest, she swayed, and then, with a soft, sickening thud, she fainted. The sound of my mother, Esther, collapsing was a dull thud, swallowed by the sudden, collective gasp of the wedding guests. Chaos erupted. It wasn't the screaming, dramatic chaos I might have expected, but a stunned, horrified unraveling. Trinity, standing at the altar in her pristine white gown, had been mid-vow. Her eyes, wide with confusion, followed the trajectory of every upward gaze until they landed on me. Her face, moments ago radiant, twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. "Daisy!" she shrieked, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. It was a sound of raw, exposed rage, not the carefully constructed innocence she usually wore. Xavier, who had been facing Trinity, slowly turned. His eyes, when they found me on the balcony, were those of a man seeing a ghost. Not a ghost from his past, but the haunting consequence of his present. His jaw slackened, his face paling to an ashen gray. He froze, a deer in headlights, unable to look away from the open book in my hands, the selfie of us glaring down at him. He knew. He knew exactly what it was. Below, people were rushing to Esther's side. Audrey, our sweet, weak-willed cousin, was already kneeling beside her, fanning her face. Jermaine Paul, the officiant, stood bewildered, his script forgotten, his eyes darting between the fainted mother of the bride and the silent woman on the balcony. His moment of realization was palpable. Then, a new ripple of commotion. Tessa, Trinity's older sister who had been standing near the back, suddenly stumbled. Her hand, holding a glass of champagne, flew out. The contents, a golden cascade, drenched Trinity's pristine white gown. It wasn't a full drenching, but enough to create an ugly, spreading stain right down the front. Tessa gasped, a picture of exaggerated dismay. "Oh my God, Trinity! I am so sorry. My heel caught. Her apology was laced with a barely perceptible smirk. It was a perfect accidental insult, adding a layer of petty, satisfying ruin to the grander scheme. Trinity, already incandescent with rage, let out a frustrated cry, half sob, half scream. The scene below was a tableau of unraveling. Whispers turned into murmurs, then into outright chatter. Phones were discreetly, and not so discreetly, pulled out. The perfect wedding, the one Esther had so desperately wanted me not to embarrass, was dissolving into a spectacle. I remained still, leaning against the railing. I didn't move, didn't speak. My expression was neutral, almost detached. The silk robe, the book, my silent presence. It was all I needed. I was not there to shout, to plead, or to explain. The evidence spoke for itself. Audrey, bless her heart, was trying to be helpful. I saw her look up at me, a flicker of concern in her eyes. She started to make her way towards the stairs that led up to my suite, probably intending to check on me, to understand what was happening. But halfway up she stopped. She looked back at the chaos below, Trinity's stained dress, Xavier's frozen horror, Esther being helped to her feet, looking utterly humiliated. Audrey hesitated, then turned back, shaken, deciding the unfolding drama below was more immediate. She was a good person, but not one for confrontation. Esther, now upright but supported by two relatives, was being escorted out of the garden. Her face was a mask of mortification, her eyes darting between me and the ruined ceremony. She didn't look angry, not really. She looked defeated. Her carefully constructed facade, the one she'd spent years maintaining, had just shattered publicly. I watched for another minute, letting the full weight of the scene settle. The string quartet had stopped playing. The guests were a buzzing, disorganized crowd. Trinity was now openly sobbing, her perfect day in tatters. Xavier stood rooted to the spot, staring at me, his future crumbling before his eyes. My work was done. I quietly turned, walked back into the penthouse suite, and placed the book on the coffee table, open to the selfie. I left it there, a permanent fixture of their ruined memory. I didn't need it anymore. 20 minutes later, I walked out of the Grandeur Gardens, past the still gossiping guests, past the frantic venue staff. No one noticed me. Or if they did, they didn't stop me. I was just another guest leaving a disastrous wedding. The air outside felt lighter, cleaner. The next day, as I sat in my apartment, a notification popped up on my phone. It was Trinity. Her Instagram, usually a curated feed of perfection, had a new post, a blurry, tear-streaked selfie of her face, taken from a low angle. The caption, stark and defiant, read, "All lies come to light." Weeks passed after the wedding that wasn't. The memory of Esther's collapse, Trinity's shriek, and Xavier's frozen horror still felt vivid, like a scene from a movie I'd watched. The internet, as expected, had been a frenzy. Someone had inevitably filmed the whole thing, and snippets of the chaos had gone viral before being pulled down. "Bride's cousin disrupts wedding with shocking revelation" was one headline I'd seen before the articles disappeared. The wedding, of course, was called off. There was no way to salvage it, not after the public spectacle. The family grapevine, usually a source of endless, irritating chatter, had gone strangely quiet around me. I was the elephant in the room, the uninvited guest who had brought the truth. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Xavier Meyer had packed up his life and moved to another city, far from the whispers and the shame. Trinity Santos, true to her nature, had deactivated all her social media accounts within days of her "All Lies Come to Light" post. She'd vanished from the public eye, at least for now. The perfect life she'd so carefully curated had imploded. One afternoon, my phone rang. It was Esther, my mother. Her voice, usually so confident and controlling, was tentative, almost small. She sounded tired, Daisy, she began, a long pause stretching between us. I just wanted to say, you were right, about everything. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken admissions. It wasn't an apology for how she'd treated me over the years, or for siding with Trinity. It was an acknowledgement of the truth of Xavier's deceit, and by extension, Trinity's manipulation. It was a concession, born from public humiliation, but a concession nonetheless. For Esther, who valued appearances above all else, this was monumental. Her world had fractured, and she was finally seeing the cracks. "Okay, Mom," I said, keeping my voice neutral. I didn't gloat. There was no victory in her pain, only a quiet understanding of how deeply she'd misjudged. I hope you're doing well," she added, her voice still strained. "I am," I replied, and I was. The call ended, leaving a strange, quiet peace in its wake. It wasn't the cathartic scream I might have imagined years ago, but it was something. A shift. A few days later, Rory and I met for coffee at our usual spot, a small independent cafe near my apartment. He looked at me across the table, his gaze steady and observant. "You know," he said, stirring his latte, "you look like peace now." I considered his words. Peace. It wasn't the triumphant, joyous feeling I might have expected from revenge. There were no parades, no fireworks, just a quiet settling, a deep internal calm that had replaced the constant hum of betrayal. "Peace with fire at the center," I corrected him, taking a sip of my own coffee. The fire wasn't rage anymore. It was a quiet, unyielding resolve, a knowledge of my own strength, and a clear understanding of the cost of other people's lies. He nodded, understanding. "So, what's next for the karmic assassin?" he teased gently. I smiled, a genuine, unforced smile. More interior design, more quiet living. The story wasn't quite over for everyone else, though. Tessa and I still talked regularly. She was thriving, a weight lifted from her shoulders now that Trinity's carefully constructed facade had crumbled. "You won't believe this," she told me one evening, her voice buzzing with barely contained glee. "Guess who I'm dating?" I waited. "Leo Vance," she announced, "Xavier's former business partner. Remember him? They had a huge falling out a few months back." I remembered Leo, a sharp, ambitious man, a few years older than Xavier, who had always seemed a little too honest for Xavier's liking. "No way," I said, genuinely surprised. "Oh, yes way," Tessa confirmed. "And he's got stories, Daisy, about Xavier's shady business dealings, his creative accounting, the way he screwed over their old clients. You know, just little tidbits I'm accidentally letting slip to Aunt Carol, who then accidentally tells everyone at church." My revenge had worked. Xavier and Trinity were gone, their perfect wedding shattered, their reputations in tatters. But Tessa, the black sheep, was still out there, meticulously, quietly, ensuring that every last lie came to light, piece by piece. My victory felt quiet, almost hollow in its certainty. There were no parades for karmic assassins. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing what was owed had been paid, and the lingering understanding that sometimes justice tastes less like triumph and more like a quiet, unsettling calm.